Today is July 8th, 2022, and my guest is Gerd Gigerenzer. Gerd was last here in December of 2019, talking about his book, Gut Feelings. His newest book is our topic for today, How to Stay Smart in a Smart World, Why Human Intelligence Still Beats Algorithms. Gerd, welcome back to EconTalk.
I'm glad to be back and to talk to you again.
My pleasure. You say at one point, you write a lot about artificial intelligence, and you say at one point that AI, artificial intelligence, lacks common sense. Explain.
Yeah. So common sense has been underestimated in psychology, in philosophy, always else. And it's a great contribution of AI to realize how difficult a common sense is to be modeled. So what that means is that, for instance, AlphaZero can beat every human in chess and Go, but it doesn't know that there is a game that's called chess or Go. So a deep neural network, in order to learn to distinguish pictures of, say, school buses from other objects on the street, needs 10,000s of pictures of school buses in order to learn that. If you have a 4-year-old and point to a school bus, you may have to point another time, and then the kid has gotten it. It has a concept of a school bus. So what I'm saying, artificial intelligence, as in deep neural networks, has a very different kind of intelligence that does not resemble much human intelligence. And basically, to understand that deep neural networks are statistical machines that can do very powerful look for correlations. And that's not the greatest ability of the human mind. We are strong in causal stories. We invent, we are looking for. A little child just asks, why do I have to eat broccoli? Why are the neighbors so much richer than we? So it wants causal stories. And another aspect of human intelligence is intuitive psychology. How can a deep neural network know about these things? And finally, there's an intuitive physics. So already children have understand that an object that disappears behind a screen is not gone. How does a neural network know that? It's very difficult. And it's the big challenge to get common sense into neural networks.
So, big issue in computer science, we've talked about it many times on this program over the years, is that, is the brain a computer? Is the computer a brain? They both have electricity. They both have on-off switches. And so there is a tendency in human thought, which is utterly fascinating, I think underappreciated, that we tend to use whatever is the most advanced technology as our model for how the brain works. It used to be a clock. It was other things in the past. And now, of course, it's a computer. And there is a presumption that when a computer learns to recognize a school bus, it's mimicking the brain. But as you point out, it's not mimicking the brain.
No.
But there may be some things that we call artificial intelligence that are brain-like and others that are not. And what are your thoughts on the limits of that process? There's a lot of nirvana, utopian thinking about what computers will be capable of in coming years. Are you skeptical of those promises?
There's certainly lots of marketing hype out there. So when IBM had this great success with Watson in the game Jeopardy, I think I was amazed. Everyone was amazed. But it's a game, again, a well-defined structure. And even the rules of Jeopardy had to be adopted to the capabilities of Watson. Then the CEO, Ginny Rometty, announced now it's the moonshot. We are not going to the moon, but to healthcare. Not because Watson knew anything about healthcare because there was the money. And then naive heads of clinics bought the advice of Watson. Watson Oncology was the first thing. And for cancer treatment, only to find out that some of the recommendations were dangerously deadly. And then the IBM clarified that Watson is at the level of a first-year medical student. So here we have an example about a general principle. If a world is stable, like a game, then algorithms will most likely beat us, perform much better. But if it's lots of uncertainty, as in cancer treatment or investment, then you need to be very cautious. The claims are probably overstated. And in that case, by the PR department of IBM.
But isn't the hope that, okay, Watson today is a first-year medical student, but give it enough data, it'll become a second-year medical student, and in a few years, it'll be the best doctor in the world, and we can all go to it for diagnosis. We'll just do a body scan, or a watch, or smartwatch will tell Watson something about our heartbeat, etc., and it will be able to do anything better than any doctor, and you won't have to wait in line because it can do this instantly.
That's a rhetoric. So if you read Harari on many other prophets of AI, that's what they preach. Now, I have studied psychology and statistics, and I know what a statistical machine can do. A deep neural network is about correlations. And it's a powerful version of a nonlinear multiple regression or a discriminant analysis. Nobody has ever talked about multiple regressions as intelligence. They can do something else. And we should not let us bluff away into the story of superintelligence. So what the real prospect is, deep neural networks can do something that we cannot do. And we can do something that they cannot do. And we should, if we want to invest into better AI, smarter AI, we also should invest in smarter people. That's what we really need. So smarter doctors, more experts who can tell the difference, and not wasting lots of money on projects like IBM's oncology that don't work. Or IBM also had Watson sold it to bankers for investment. If Watson could invest, would be the great investor, then IBM wouldn't be in the financial troubles it is.
Now, what I love about that insight is focusing on what distinguishes where artificial intelligence, or at least computers at this stage, can be extremely powerful versus not, and that's stable. And there's a more general principle, and I think it's in your book, but certainly it's in your other book or in other people's books, which is fundamentally, when we're looking at correlations in big data, we're presuming that the past will tell us what the future will be like. And sometimes it can, because it's stable. The environment's stable enough that whatever were the patterns that were revealed in the past, those patterns will persist in the future. But in most human environments, they don't. And so the promise of big data is, I like what, two things. Past EconTalk guest Ed Leamer likes to say we're storytelling pattern-seeking animals. And we are good at patterns and causation, and sometimes they're correct, but the computer doesn't have any common sense to examine whether a correlation is just a correlation or a causation.
So the general point is, I have taken so I've been studying simple heuristics that make us smart. And simple heuristics, it's like, you probably know the story of Harry Markowitz, who got his Nobel Prize for an optimization model that tells you how to diversify your money into N assets. But when he himself invested his own money, for the time after retirement, he used his Nobel Prize winning optimization method? No, he didn't. He used a simple heuristic. A heuristic is a rule of thumb, and that's called invest equally. So it's called 1/n. N is the number of assets or options. If you have 2, 50-50. If 3, a third. That's a heuristic. And in a world which is called in decision theory of calculable risk, that's a stable world, that would be stupid. But in the real world of finance, studies have shown it often outperforms Markowitz optimization, including modern Bayesian methods of that. So the general lesson is there's a difference between stable worlds and unstable worlds. And particular, if the future is not like the past, then big data doesn't help you. And for a finance Markowitz optimization, you need lots of data to estimate all these parameters. The heuristic 1/n needs no data from the past. It's the opposite of big data.
Well, except for the problem, you got to figure out n. N doesn't come. Yeah. The number of assets is not given. True. So that's another problem.
Yeah, but that's the same thing for Markowitz optimization.
Yeah, for sure. Now, you are a strong and, I think, eloquent promoter of human abilities and a counterweight to the view that we're going to be dominated by machines. They're going to take over because they'll be able to do things everything. And so that's so we're kind of remarkable. Our brains are really amazing, and yet at the same time, there's a paradox in your book, which is that you're very worried about the ability of tech companies to use big data to manipulate us. How do you resolve that paradox?
So the statement that you made before is just right on the point. So it's not about AI by itself. It's about the people behind AI and their motives. So we usually talk about whether AI will be omniscient or AI will be just an assistant tool. But we need to talk about those behind it. What's the motives? And that's what really worries me. And so it's certainly that we are in a situation today where a few tech companies and mostly a few relatively young white males who are immensely rich shape the emotions, the values, and also control the time of almost everyone else. And that worries me. You are a free market person, and I also am a person who tries to believe in people's abilities. But we need to be aware that the opposite won't happen. So, and here, one thing that we might think about how to improve the situation is the following. Google gets 80% of the revenue from advertisement, Facebook 97%. And that makes the customer, the user, no longer the customer. So in the book, How to Stay Smart, I use an analogy, the free coffee house. So imagine in your hometown, there is a coffee house that offers free coffee. Soon all the other coffee houses will be bankrupt. And we all go there, enjoy our times, but in the tables are bugged, and on the walls there are videos which record everything we talk and to whom we talk and when we do this, and that will be analyzed. And in the coffee house, there are salespeople, who interrupt us all the time in order to make us buy personalized products. The salespeople are the customers of this coffee house. We, who enjoy our coffee, we are the product being sold, precisely our time, our attention. So that's roughly how the business model of Facebook and others functions. And it also gives us an idea about a solution. Namely, why don't we want to have real coffee houses back where we can pay rather than being the product?
The problem with that, and by the way, I'm I started off. I'm sure longtime listeners can go back to my earliest episodes of this topic where I was extremely skeptical and less worried, not worried at all, to a little bit worried, and now today somewhat worried. So, and listeners will recognize my metaphor of the repair person who comes to your house to fix your washing machine, does it for free. But while he's there, he takes a lot of photographs of what you bought and what's on your shelves and says, oh, by the way, you don't mind if I use these to sell to my friends because they want to know what you buy and what you're interested in and what books are on your shelf and the receipt that you have here for this product you bought. And there is something creepy about it. The creepy part about it for me is that most people don't think about it. They don't realize that there's cameras in the coffee house. They don't realize that the person, that everything they say is being recorded and who they're talking to and what the topics are and so on. On the other hand, you could argue, and sometimes I argue like this because it's interesting and maybe true. Okay, so those salespeople interrupt my conversation every once in a while. They don't literally shut me up. They do. They hold an ad next to my friend's head and distract me from you and I having this conversation in the coffee house. And I find that somewhat annoying, but actually it's kind of useful because sometimes it's something I actually want because they know a lot about me and the coffee's free. So you're telling me I need to go to this coffee house over here where I don't get interrupted. Okay, that's nice, but the coffee's $5 a cup. Why should I? What's scary about it to you? And I think there is stuff to be scared about. I'm playing a little bit of rhetoric here now, but I'm increasingly scared. So take a shot.
There are two kinds of personal information that need to be distinguished. The one is like collecting information about what books you buy and recommending you other books. The other thing is collect all information about you that one can, including whether you're depressed today, whether you're pregnant, whether you have had a heart failure or have cancer, and use that information to target you on the right moment with the right advertisement. So that's the part that we do not need. And also, so in some countries, like, so I'm living in Berlin, and East Germany had the Stasi. And if the Stasi would have had these methods, that would be over enthusiastic. So we see something similar in China and other countries. And the final point I want to make is what people underestimate is how closely tech companies are interrelated with governments. So they say, it doesn't matter whether Zuckerberg knows what I'm doing, but the government doesn't know. Snowden has, a few years ago, shown how close the connection in the US is. In the UK, there's Karma Police, and many countries. So let me make another point. So what would it cost us to get the freedom and privacy back? So I made a little calculation. If you take the Facebook, now Meta corporation, and would reimburse, reimburse Zuckerberg for his entire revenue, it would be about per month, it would be about $2 per month per person. That's all. And those countries who cannot afford $2, then we pay $4. And that would solve the problem. So there is a solution for that. If you want to go there, the question is how we get there.
Well, the reason I'm a little bit skeptical of that, the reason is that I pay $5 a month for an app that is helping me with my Hebrew. I pay $5 a month for a lot of things, by the way. I pay. There's a lot of Substack and Patreon accounts. I pay $5 a month too. I have a lot of $60 a year. Somebody has decided that $4.99 is pretty easy for people to swallow. And by the way, when it says $60 a year, sometimes I go, oh, that's a lot. But $4.99 a month, that's nothing. Yeah. So anyway, I have a bunch of those. And you're suggesting that Zuckerberg could have twice the money, twice the revenue he has now if he would charge people $4 a month instead of $2 a month. Now, economics predicts that in general, when you make people pay $4 for something that they used to get for free, you won't have 2 billion users. You're going to have fewer. But as long as you still have a billion, you're suggesting that going to $4 a month would have such an enormous effect on their user base that Zuckerberg won't do it voluntarily. We'd have to impose something like that through regulation.
Yeah, that's the problem, how to get there. And I see the problem. But I'm just saying that it wouldn't be, in terms of the contribution of individuals to get their privacy back, it wouldn't be much. It's just a coffee.
But most people don't care. So
yeah, that's a problem.
Would you argue, are you arguing that they should care? I think you're arguing they should care because they don't realize, I think a lot of people don't realize what they're actually being surveilled about, how widespread it is. But you're also arguing that even if they knew, and I think many people do know, we'll talk about that maybe in a minute, they go, what's the big deal? I get a lot of products that I'm interested in. It's actually pretty good. They don't realize potentially that the products that they see in their search engine aren't really the ones that they want. It's the ones that the real customers line up. And we recently had a conversation with the head of Neva about who used to work for Google Ads. So let me try a different way to get at a better situation, see what you think. Sort of this is the way an economist might think about it. So that coffee shop, the real problem is there's only one free coffee shop. And everybody's in that coffee shop. So when I'm on Twitter, I've got my followers. I've accumulated them over years.
Yeah.
I go to the new coffee shop that competes with it. It's empty. So it's very hard for a new coffee shop to start up. Because what we'd like there to be, one way to think about how to improve the situation is there's a lot of coffee shops. In one of the coffee shops, the coffee is free. So are the pastries. It's fantastic quality. The problem is that they force you to give blood when you come in. They scan your, they do an MRI. They know everything, like you say, they know all your mental states. It's very invasive. But there's another coffee shop down the street where it's not free. Might be a subscription model. Once you're in the coffee shop, you can have as much coffee as you like. There's a third coffee shop where it's by the cup because some people don't like to drink so much and it's not worth it to pay the full subscription. The problem is I can't find my friends in those coffee shops. So it's what I would suggest for those people like you and maybe me who are worried about surveillance and government intervention against us, tyranny, let's find a way that I can port my friends to a different coffee shop without having to start from scratch.
Yeah.
Possible?
I mean, humans have imagination and we could find a way to get there. It's just we also need people who want that.
Yeah.
And as you hinted before, there's the so-called privacy paradox, which is that in many countries, people say that their greatest concern about the digital life is that they don't know where the data is going and what's done with that. If that's the greatest concern, then you would expect that they would be willing to pay something. That's the economic view. Yeah? You pay something for that. But then, so in Germany is a good case because in Germany we had the East German Stasi. We had another history before that. The Nazis, who would have been enjoyed about such a surveillance system. And so Germans would be a good candidate for a people who are worried about their privacy and would be willing to pay. That's what I thought. So I have done now 3 surveys since 2018, and the last one this year. So representatives sample of all Germans over 18 and asked them the question, how much would you willing to pay for all social media if you could keep your data? So we are talking about the data about whether you're depressed, whether you're pregnant, and all those things that they really don't need. And so how much would you be willing to pay to get your privacy back? 75% of Germans said nothing. Not a single euro. And the others were willing to pay something. Yeah? So if you have that situation, that people say, oh, my greatest worry is about my data. At the same time, no, I'm not paying anything for that. Then that's called the privacy paradox.
So I found that fascinating. And I want to give you what came to my mind and let you react to it. So at night, when I get ready for bed, I close the curtains. I don't want people looking at me as I get ready for bed. I suppose I would feel differently if there was a camera taking a photo of my pre-sleep preparations. If no one could see my face and it went out into the internet and no one could identify me. And it was my body, but it's not obviously mine. And the only people who look at it are machines that say, wow, he's fatter than I would have thought. Let's send him some ads for weight loss, or let's send him some ads for books about exercise or dieting. And again, I might be excited to get those. That might be wonderful. The real problem would be that the books they send me are really bad books, but people have paid to get those ads in front of me, and I'm stuck looking at those, and I don't realize that, and so on. I think the privacy paradox is the fact that when you tell me that my data is available on the web, I think, well, but no one person's really looking at it. They can. There are individuals who could look at it.
Right.
But so Mark Zuckerberg does have my data. Not mine so much. I'm rarely on Facebook, but Facebook users' data. But I assume he doesn't spend each night going through it going, wow, I can't believe how fat he is. So, my scale doesn't, I don't have a smart scale, but if you had a smart scale, they'd really know exactly how much I weigh. And they'd know that my shoes were artificially making me look 5'7" instead of 5'6", and so on. But I think most of us assume that, it's anonymous more or less. And that's the problem, is that it doesn't have to be, and we kind of ignore the possibility that it might not be anonymous, really.
And I see people sleepwalking into surveillance. So, for instance, in the studies we have done, most people are not aware that a smart TV may record every personal conversation people have in front of it, whether it's in the living room or in the bedroom. At least the German data, 85% are not aware about that. And although it can be found in Samsung's end user notes, but who is reading these things? Also, for instance, think about, there's already surveillance in a child's life. So remember Mattel's Barbie? So the first Barbie was modeled after a German tabloid cartoon, the Bild-Zeitung, and it just gave totally unrealistic long legs and tailored figures. So the result was that quite a few little girls found their body not right. In 1998, the second version came, could talk briefly, utter sentences like, math is hard. Let's go shopping. So the little girls got a second message. They're not up to math. They are consumers. And the 2015 generation called Hello Barbie, which got the Big Brother award, could actually, or can actually, do a conversation with the little girl. But the little girl doesn't know that all the hopes and fears and anxieties it trusts the Barbie doll are all recorded and sent off to third parties, analyzed by algorithms for advertisement purposes. And also, the parents can buy it, the record, on a daily or weekly basis to spy on their child. Now, two things may happen for us. One is the obvious, that maybe when the little girl is a little bit older, then she will find out and trust is gone in her beloved Barbie doll and also maybe in her parents. Mm-hmm. But what I think is the even deeper consequence is the little girl may not lose trust. The little girl may think that being surveilled, even secretly, that's how life is. Yeah. And so here is another dimension that the potential of algorithms for surveillance changes our own values. We are no longer concerned so much about privacy. We still say we are concerned, but not really. Yeah, and then we'll get a new generation of people.
Yeah, I don't know how. I mean, it sounds horrible, and I think tied to government, it's authoritarian government. It's terrifying potentially. I do think the smart TV is a great example of this privacy paradox. The way I'm thinking about it, which is, okay, so it hears what I say in the bedroom, but it doesn't know it's really me. No one's paying attention. It's just an algorithm that analyzes it. And I think, first of all, that's today, and I think that's it's a very dangerous thing for all kinds of obvious reasons. I think the other thing though is the movie Minority Report, which is in my top 10 movies, alongside The Lives of Others, which is about the Stasi, by the way. I'll just throw that in as a bonus. But the Minority Report was very prescient. A lot of it is about the dangers of smart technology, artificial intelligence used to predict guilt before a crime. It has this idea of precognition, that it knows what you're going to do because it has enough information about you to forecast. And of course, your point, which is deep and true, is that we're human beings. We're not chess boards. But one of the things about that movie is that those kind of movies usually rely on the fact that there's some corner of existence that's still private. In that movie, there's a sequence where the hero is able to do something outside of the surveillance world. There's an underground, there's a corner, there's a place. And the reality, though, is that if that world were here, there would be no such place.
Yeah, right.
And I think that's the world we ought to be worried about. In the movie, there's a corner because otherwise the plot's not going to work and it's not interesting and the hero's going to get killed and that's the end of the story. But in real life, you really don't want everything to be Barbie. I don't think listening to you recording and someone else knowing everything about you that is you're unaware of seems horrible.
Yeah. So the Minority Report also illustrates another twist. So the predicting whether someone will commit another crime is a situation of high uncertainty where algorithms are actually not good.
Yeah.
So we know that recidivism predictions can be done by just simple heuristics with 2 or 3 variables, as good as the secret compass or other algorithms. The 2 or 3 variables are previous offenses and age. Maybe a third one, gender. Okay, that's and that is something which I find very interesting, because both sides, though the enthusiasts who tell us that soon there will be a super intelligence where we can upload our brains for whatever reason, would a super intelligence want our brains uploaded? And we are, that's the Californian dream of eternal life.
Yeah.
And also the other side. So this great book by Shoshana Zuboff about the both sides assume that the algorithms would be so perfect.
Yeah.
And that's only true in a stable world. In astronomy, they will be very useful. But it's not the case. And I don't see a way to get there. There will be increase a little bit, but there will be not get there. And then we have a situation where we are our behavior is predicted and controlled by algorithms which are actually not very good.
Yeah.
But still we submit to the recommendations. And people today on YouTube, some 75% of all videos being seen are no longer chosen by the viewers. They are recommended by algorithms or just played. And that's why I think an important partial solution is make people smart, open their eyes, and make them think about what's happening.
Yeah, I've always liked that solution, which you could call more information, raise awareness. A simple way to describe it, it's called education. Mm-hmm. You should, I spent a good chunk of my life thinking about, say, confirmation bias and similar problems. And when you make people aware of it, it's pretty cool, It's a good thing to be aware of, that you're easily fooled. And I think you quote Richard Feynman, the first principle is not to fool yourself, and you're the easiest person to fool. So the more we make people aware of that, you think it make a better world. I've become a little bit skeptical of people's desire for truth. I think they like comfort more than they like truth. And so the education, which is, here I am, I'm a president of a college, and I run a weekly podcast that tries to educate people, but it's a quixotic mission, I'm afraid. It may not be the road to real success there, but I would say it's the only road I want to go down. I think it's the right road, is to encourage people to be aware of these things and to be more sensitive to them.
Yeah. So I share the two sides, but I think it's an obligation to be optimistic and do something. So, and one can really point to blind spots. So, for instance, the most recent international PISA study. So it looks at all the OECD countries and tests the 15-year-olds, and they
in math, right?
In math, in language, in the sciences, and this time they also had a component about digital understanding. And to make it short, 90% of 15-year-olds, that's are the digital natives, do not know how to tell facts from fakes. So there's something to be done.
Yeah.
So governments, they spend billions for tablets and whiteboards for technology in schools. They spend almost nothing for making teachers smart and pupils smart. And with smart, I mean that they understand these concepts. There is a group in Stanford in the educational department, and they have looked at a little bit older kids, so undergraduates, and given them websites, real websites, and asked them whether they're trustworthy and how to find out. So what one should do is read a little bit and then immediately go into About Us, and then leave the page and find out who is behind it. 97% of these young people in Stanford don't know that. Yeah. So that's called lateral reading. They read a website still as in the pre-digital ages, from the beginning to the end, and then look at whether it looks cool, and then it's trustworthy,
or whether it confirms their worldview and makes them feel good about themselves. Yeah, it reminds me. A lot of our conversation reminds me of The Truman Show, which was also a very prescient film, where a Big Brother person played by Ed Harris was manipulating Jim Carrey in the movie. It's a phenomenal movie, and it. Slight spoiler alert at the end of that film, I think it captures the way most people feel about this. Like, oh, okay, at this point, Truman doesn't realize he's on a TV show, and some of the people who've been watching the TV show then just, it's over, switch the channel. Human life has been manipulated. It's a grotesque and powerful moment in this world. And the people watching is like, okay, well, switch. What else is on? And it's a deliberately, I think, anti-climax. The movie is a phenomenal, one of my favorite, really one of my favorite movies. Yeah. But I think that's I think you're pointing at something really profound, which is if we don't think about how the world works, you don't know how the world works, you will be the customer. It's like, if you don't know who the sucker is at the poker table, it's you. And most of us are the sucker at the poker table. So it's really what you're saying here. It's a little bit depressing.
Yeah. And there may be a development going that. For instance, we have had in democracies now quite a number of presidents who seem to have been elected because of their entertainment value. So Boris Johnson is just leaving at this moment.
Yep.
Donald Trump already left, but may come back.
Yep.
And the idea that education, that understanding the world, the having control over the world and also over oneself. So it seems to be fading, and we need to steer against that. And we can do something. We can start in the schools and open the eyes. And in the same way as we can teach risk literacy in general. And it's still not happening in schools, except in Finland.
Yeah, the problem is that the risk analysis, thinking about risk is a perfect example of the challenge, which is, late in my life, I've become very aware of how complex uncertainty and risk are, which is ironic. I'm an economist trained in statistics, econometrics, and so on. And I think people start to realize, most people don't really understand risk and they don't understand probability. And so what we need to do is introduce statistics into high school curriculum, into the high school curriculum. So they have, and it's horrible. It's mostly horrible. It's cookbook, teaching people how to calculate means and medians, things you can test on an exam. What's the standard deviation? The subtle, deep, common sense ideas of how to think about the fact that the world is unpredictable. There's not a curriculum for that. And that's the challenge, I think, is creating educational material that would help open people's eyes.
Yeah. So, long time ago, I published a book called Calculated Risk. In the UK, it's called Reckoning with Risk. The American publisher didn't want to translate it in Reckoning with Risk because I think no American would read a book with Reckoning in the title. Anyhow, which gives such a recipe. And one could teach that. I'm all for teaching statistical thinking,
exactly.
Not probability theory.
Yes.
It's deadly. It enters here, exits immediately there. And it's not done. It could be done with examples that open your eyes. So, for instance, even, God knows, teenagers can be can learn about how to evaluate a positive COVID test. What does it mean? How do you do that? And what are the uncertainties about the hit rate, the false alarm rate, and so on? Just think in these terms. At the moment, I'm every week giving an online or in-person training of doctors in clinics and doing basically what they should learn. So the average doctor does not understand what a sensitivity, what a positive predictive value is, or a false positive. Ask your own doctor. And so then they cannot read an article in their own field to evaluate. How good is cancer screening? So I just said a group of lung cancer specialists, if you think they understand, a few do, but the majority, no. So I just say this in order to say there are so many blind spots which we could fill, actually. And then we can see there is certainly a kind of attitude among some people who just don't want to know. But we have to do our homework first.
One of my favorite lessons from Nassim Taleb is that when you're at the casino and you're trying to figure out the game of roulette, you don't ask the carpenter who built the roulette wheel on the grounds thinking that, well, who could know more about it than the person who built it? Yeah. He knows nothing about probability. He knows about wood. He knows about circles, spheres, and other things. And I think there is a trust in the medical profession, often deserved, but often not deserved, because there's uncertainty in many medical diagnoses and in treatments. And COVID's been a fantastic example of this. The idea, we recently had Vinay Prasad on the program. It hasn't aired yet, but it'll have aired by the time this episode, our conversation is out. He points out that for young men in particular, particularly taking the Moderna vaccine, the odds of myocarditis, swelling of the heart valve, which is not a healthy thing, is about 1 in 3,000. Is that a big number or a small number? So I think if you ask people on the street, they would know how to answer that question and maybe not know how to think about it. But you'd certainly want to know something about that when you're asking, say, a 23-year-old male to get a vaccine, who, by the way, if he gets COVID, have very little risk of death. Now, you could argue he should worry about it because he could infect other people. Yes, of course. But just that simple fact of thinking about that trade-off between his own health with the vaccine, his own health without it, the fact that most people don't know how to think about that. In fact, their natural thought is, and it's a heuristic, by the way, well, vaccine's better than not. End of story. Or the other side, the other heuristic, a vaccine could have side effects, not taking it. So I think it would be good for the world if we spent more time thinking about these complexities, which don't come so easily to us.
Yeah. And we would need policymakers who understand that point. I can tell you stories. I've been talking with the CEOs of major hospitals in Europe, showing them data about their own medical students at the end of their career, not understanding numbers. And most of them just close their eyes and think education is the least interesting thing to do. It's more like publishing, clinical work, and those, as one CEO explained to me, those who aren't good in publishing and good in clinical work, they care about education. That's about the thinking. And of course, those who publish don't understand the numbers either.
Your argument, which you alluded to here, you make, I think, very persuasively in the book, is that we spend a lot of time teaching people how to use technology, right? Yeah. Especially older people, right, who are not as comfortable with it, or actually think you should read the manual. Most people, kids, young people, easily grab the thing, they start playing with it, they figure it out in 5 minutes. So we spend a lot of time on that. We don't spend any time thinking about what this does to us. And it might be okay, but you should think about that. And it's weird that we don't.
Yeah. So, particularly in the digital age, one thing becomes clear, that people should think a little bit more. So I start out with a chapter on online dating. And there is a famous online agency that advertises its success by saying every 11 minutes, a single falls in love in their agency. Isn't it great? So you pay a few €100 and wait 11 minutes.
That's it.
That's it. And it's a success advertisement. It runs since years. And if people would just think for a moment and make a little calculation. So every 11 minutes, a single falls in love. And let's forget that we need two singles. And they need to fall in love with one another. Yeah? That doesn't matter. Yeah?
Okay.
So just 11 minutes, a single. In an hour, it's about 6 who fall in love. On a day, it's 144. And in a year, it's roughly 50,000. So if the online agency has 1 million customers, then in a year, 5%, 50,000 fall in love. So you can expect that you may pay for 10 years. Then you have a 50-50 chance, roughly, if you're still paying and waiting to fall. So this is a simple exercise that everyone could do, although almost nobody does it. And the actual studies about the success of online dating confirm that. It's in the order of 5% per year who find a good partner, and 95% they just pay. So I observe in many areas that people haven't been taught to think. They're just impressed by these numbers. And in the digital age, we need smarter people. We need invest in people and not leaning back and do everything what your Alexa tells you.
Well, there's a phrase, there's a word that gets thrown around a lot which is numeracy, which means literacy in the area of numbers. Well, you just gave a simple example of where a little bit of numeracy would go a long way, but, and you left out the opportunity cost. I could take those few $100s and maybe go sit in a bar or cafe or somewhere, buy a bottle of champagne and then sit on a street corner every night, and maybe I'd do a lot better. Right. But I think it comes back to a very deep question that I don't have an answer to, which is, if you think about, let's just take math education as an example. Math education, I know it best in the United States. Math education in the United States is designed to get you ready for calculus eventually. Now, the fact that most people won't study calculus and most people won't understand it if they do very well is ignored. We need to build the building blocks, and we understand some of the building blocks along the way are going to be useful: geometry, algebra, trigonometry, pre-calculus, and so on. But the goal is to head us toward both the SATs, college entrance exams, advanced placement exams to get me ready for college and give me early college credit. And very little of that is about thinking. A good calculus class, my wife's a calculus teacher, she actually, I think, taught people how to think quite a bit. But much of it is taught as a cookbook. It's a set of recipes for getting answers on exams. It's not designed to give deep insight. And I think that's true of a lot of what we teach in America, and certainly what we're trying to do here at Shalem College in Jerusalem is very different. We're trying to teach people how to think and give them the tools for exploring the world. Most formal education doesn't do that. Most formal education is designed to give people a strategy for taking an exam, which is, most of life is not an exam, very little. And so it's an aptitude test or a Sitzfleisch test that you push, you sat long enough. But the idea of teaching real numeracy, real statistical understanding about uncertainty, that just isn't done. And it's a tragedy.
Yeah, you're totally right. And one might reconsider dropping exams and find a way to motivate young people so they do it for intrinsic purposes because they understand and get stronger. So when I learned math, it was like that. I got a solution, a formula, and then some exercises to find out the right parameters to put that in. Yeah? This was mindless math.
Yeah.
And good math would be to give pupils a problem they have no solution for. Give them a problem and let them make errors and find a way and discuss them among others to solve a problem. So that is thinking. And that also creates a different error culture that one understands making errors is a positive thing. It is not making errors is just mechanical. Any intelligent system makes errors. And we could implement that in a way, starting from school into universities and to a general goal about problem solving in an imaginative way. And that leads them later to what we suffer in large corporations is negative error cultures. Nobody dares to admit an error, or many just don't make decisions anymore to avoid any errors. And we pay dearly for that.
So, of course, the challenge is that if you go to parents and say, I'm going to give you a choice between two schools. This school is going to be a cookbook school, recipes, et cetera. When they're done, they're going to take the SAT. They're going to get into a good college. And that college, of course, is just another place of credentialing. You're not going to learn so much, but your child will prove that they have discipline, and they'll learn something maybe if they pick the right field. But at the end, they'll get a good job. And this other college, it's uncertain what's going to happen. They're not going to have a formal measure of their success. They'll just be smarter. They'll just know how to think. Very similar to the challenge, that I have here with a liberal arts college. People say, well, they study philosophy, history, and literature. Well, what's that good for? And I say thinking, listening, reading, asking deep questions, appreciating that questions don't always have an answer, and how to cope with that. And even better, understanding when someone else is talking nonsense, you'll have a way of appreciating that. You won't be fooled again. But that's a harder sell because it's uncertain. It's kind of ironic, right?
But some countries are better. I mentioned before Finland. So they finish in the regular schools. They are typically on top. So they are 15 years or compared to others. They are Finland and Japan, although they're very different ways. They find their ways. And it's not a school that's geared, the Finnish system, not geared to examines. On the opposite, but they do well on the exams. So it's not a trade-off in a sense. But the future, also going back to the surveillance thing, the future of a democracy is in people who think, who want to think, and not just follow some message. And the Chinese social credit system that we haven't talked about is one way to go towards basically total control of the citizens in terms that every citizen has a social credit score. It's like a FICO score, but now for everything that can be measured, including your political and social. And that's very similar to what you just complained, that an educational system is geared on numbers at the end. That you have a certain score. That's all that matters. And in the most Westerners, they have really a revulsion when they hear about the Chinese social credit system, but it's the same spirit. You just put a number on people. And then, if the number is public, and that's the very idea, then you immediately know whom you can trust or not. Wouldn't that be convenient?
Kind of like finding out what your best romantic partner would be, you know, a
Yes.
97 out of 100. Wow, that'll be great. I'll be happy every day. Or maybe 97 days out of 100 anyway.
And it's actually happening that in the advertisement for finding a partner in China, quite a few people advertise their social credit score.
Fascinating.
And so there is another world out there, which I do not want, but I could understand that, people later think it is a great option. It's a world where we all are surveilled, predicted, and controlled, where the good guys defined by a government, or get goodies, like in China, you get, in a hospital, you're treated first. If you have a high score, those with lower score have to wait, and those with lower score get punished. So there are 10,000s in the last years of Chinese who were not allowed to purchase a plane ticket because of low scores. Others were not.
Because they were jaywalking. Yeah. They were caught jaywalking or raising their voice in a restaurant or whatever is the...
Whatever thing, And you get good points if you visit your old parents. And you get negative points if you put a search term like Dalai Lama. No. But it is an alternative. And as far as we know, many people in China find this a good system. And what I see in Germany is that the number of people who think a social credit system would be a good idea in Germany is increasing. It is in 2018, it was 10%. And now, 22, it is 20%. And what do you think? Highest more among the young or among the old?
Young.
Yes. Among the young, it's 28%.
Yeah.
And there's one group which just I found striking, the German Beamten, so the civil, the people who have their lifelong sentence working for a government, it's 37% of them think it would be a good idea. They probably believe they're on the right side anyhow.
Yeah,
they're obedient to government, and why not collect a few goodies?
Well, let's close and say something about democracy. You took a cheap shot at Boris Johnson and Donald Trump, and they certainly do have an entertainment.
Yeah.
Both of them had a clown-like performance aspect to them, to their success. But they also tapped into something, I think, that was real. You can agree or disagree with it, but they certainly aren't merely entertaining. They actually, I think, were very skilled politically in understanding that there was a market opportunity, a political market opportunity, that some people were being ignored and who felt they were being ignored, and it was important to them that someone could hear them. And all of what you've written in this book is deeply alarming in an authoritarian state. But in a way, it's even more alarming in a democracy. If people are not thoughtful about what they consume in terms of information, if they're not thoughtful about how they could be being manipulated by advertisers in the political area, and they're overconfident in their understanding of how the world works as a result, and the information stream they consume, which we haven't really talked about, is manipulated in all kinds of ways that they don't, that they're not aware of. If we don't educate people about that, democracy is going to have a very tough time thriving, because it's going to be easily manipulated. In some sense, it already is. The amount of outrage and partisan zeal is not so much a result, in my mind, of the world, of what the stakes being higher. It's a result of what we consume and how we consume it online is different than how it used to be. And it seems like a very bad future.
Yeah, but it's not destiny. We can change that. So, for instance, if we invest not only in tablets and whiteboards, but in making young people smart, open their eyes, that can be done. And we know how it's being done. Teach them lateral reading. Teach them click discipline. Yeah? Don't click at the first entry and why. So these things can be done. We can change the university education. And there are also economists can do their share. There are these fascinating studies with eBay by a Californian economist, Steve Tadelis, who just ran experiments and found out that a certain kind of the keyword brand advertising actually was a negative profit for eBay and not the promised $12 for every $1 they made. So if you do that, then you can find out, and this should be in the interest of companies to find out whether their personalized ad investments are really pay. So there is lots of things to do to create a better world, a world where the internet is more like it was once meant to be. An aid, a tool to get information, to get reliable information, to understand where you can find reliable information. And instead, it's now both. Yeah, it's a host of information and disinformation. We need to get rid of the disinformation part, and we could think more about the deep reasons, so the business models, instead of just finding Facebook another time violating, but it can't do different if they have the same business model. And most important, I think what we can do is invest in people, make people smart. If we want to maintain a democracy, then it only works with people who think, who critically think, and who are who want to live a life of self-determination and judgment.
My guest today has been Gerd Gigerenzer. His book is How to Stay Smart in a Smart World. Gerd, thanks for being part of EconTalk.
It was great to talk to you again.
This is EconTalk, part of the Library of Economics and Liberty. For more EconTalk, go to econtalk.org, where you can also comment on today's podcast and find links and readings related to today's conversation. The sound engineer for EconTalk is Rich Goyette. I'm your host, Russ Roberts. Thanks for listening. Talk to you on Monday.